So people are complaining about the lack of leadership in the Biden administration, but is there really a basis to argue that? Let's talk about it in today's video.
It's Independence Day, so let's talk about what's going on in America. Freedom, it's under attack in your state. Your Republican leaders, they're banning books, making it harder to vote, restricting speech in classrooms, even criminalizing women and doctors. I urge all of you living in Florida to join the fight, or join us in California, where we still believe in freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom to choose, freedom from hate, and the freedom to love. Don't let them take your freedom.
Paid for by Newsom for California Governor 2022.
Hi, I'm Mike Reiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So you just saw an ad that California Governor Gavin Newsom ran in the Florida market on the 4th of July weekend, attacking Florida Governor Ron Desantis. Now, like many of you, I loved that ad. And frankly, I'd love to see more aggressive behavior by Democrats just like that. There are definitely times I've been frustrated with the caution that we've seen coming out of the White House and the sense that, somehow we're not fighting effectively enough, right? I mean, I've seen the memes about how FDR, when the Supreme Court was striking down his laws, announced that he was going to pack the court, and he didn't hesitate to do that. But what those memes seem to be forgetting is the fact that when FDR made that threat, he actually had the votes in Congress. Biden, at this point, doesn't really have the votes to do much of anything. I mean, we have the narrowest of majorities in the House. But considering that, it's actually amazing how much the House has been able to pass under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi. And to give the squad credit and the so-called progressive caucus, they've actually been very savvy in how they've utilized their power, realizing that a lot of the time, half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. But in the Senate, that's a whole different matter. I mean, literally, if we lose a single Democratic vote, then we're unable to pass whatever we want. And that's created a situation where Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema in particular, but really any Democrat, can essentially serve as a veto to getting anything done. And it's really tied the hands of this administration, their ability to be able to get things done. I mean, we've seen criticism from some people of, the Biden administration hasn't been aggressive enough in taking on the Supreme Court over the abortion issue. But in fact, President Biden's been quite aggressive about it and quite vocal about how he feels the Supreme Court has taken the wrong steps and how he's going to do everything within his power as president to be able to protect the right to choose. Although that power is pretty limited, is the truth of the matter. Nevertheless, given our frustration, you can understand why some Democrats like me are all excited to see people like Gavin Newsom or Jay Pritzker from Illinois taking on the Republicans and really putting them in their place, right? But what strikes me is how often one person who's been very aggressive in confronting Republicans, who's relatively young, and who is really a very impressive leader for the Democrats, is frequently ignored in that discussion. And that person is Kamala Harris. I mean, just the other day I was reading an article about how Kamala Harris is meeting with Democratic legislators from anti-abortion states to try to kind of develop a strategy for dealing with the attacks on abortion in those states. That's leadership. I also read a column by Jennifer Rubin, who's actually a Republican, or a former Republican, I guess, talking about how Democrats should listen to Kamala Harris and follow her example. What's the leadership that Kamala Harris is providing, according to Rubin? Well, one, she is putting the Supreme Court on the ballot as a threat to equality and democracy. I mean, Kamala Harris, as a lawyer and a former prosecutor, really has the ability to be very aggressive and to forcefully advocate for the fact that the Supreme Court is really off the rails. Secondly, she is calling out Republicans for what they are, extremists. And we need to do that. I mean, we need to make it clear that this isn't some balancing act between two parties that really are the same, but just have slight differences in philosophy. No, we're talking about a difference now where you have one party that believes in democracy and one party that's increasingly leading us towards an authoritarian, white, Christian, nationalist autocracy. Nobody except for the most extreme people in the United States are in favor of that. And we need to make it clear that that's what you're voting for when you vote for the Republican Party. Third, she's expressing contempt for Republicans' ludicrous defense of easy access to semi-automatic weapons. And this is an issue where the vast majority of Americans agree with our position on it. And the defenses that Republicans and the NRA have been raising against some efforts to try to limit access to these weapons really do not receive a positive reaction when most voters hear them. And finally, she's redirecting Democrats to productive action. And that's really the key here. I mean, we actually can do something about this. And what it is to elect more Democrats in the next election. I mean, if we can hold on to the House, which unfortunately, given gerrymandering right now and the actions of certain courts, is a bit of a long shot, but still doable, and increase our margin in the Senate, which actually now most of the rating services are saying is about a 50-50 shot. Quite remarkable considering the negativity of the atmosphere that we're in right now. And if oil prices continue to drop and inflation starts to slow down as a result of the action of the feds, and maybe we get some good news from Ukraine, then the Democrats will really have a positive case to make for them to stay in office, aside from the negative case of defending ourselves and our country from the actions of this extremist right-wing Supreme Court. I mean, what's remarkable to me when I look at the past couple of years is not the failures we've had. It's the fact that we've been able to pass remarkably progressive legislation through the House, and that much of this legislation has received the support of 48 out of 50 members of the Senate, including a number of them from very conservative states, who have stated on the record at times that they're willing to get rid of the filibuster to pass some of this legislation. That's what's significant. If we just have a little bit more, then we can actually get there. And so now is not the time to be discouraged. Now is the time to get out there and get people to vote, which is exactly the kind of leadership that Kamala Harris is providing. So why is it that we view Kamala Harris so negatively? Well, it's easy for us to argue that it's sexism or racism, and certainly there's a certain amount of that. But it goes beyond that a little bit. I mean, Joe Biden, with his kindly demeanor and his image something akin to a kindly grandfather, has been a little bit hard for the right wing to attack on Fox News. I mean, the worst attack they've been able to come up with is that he's not as articulate and quick as people might like, which is really rich after we survived 4 years of Donald Trump. But Kamala Harris, on the other hand, I mean, she's a real threat with how articulate she is and smart she is, and with her impressive background as a prosecutor. But she's somebody who the right can demonize, both because of her gender and her race. She's very easy to paint as the other that you should be scared of, much as they did with Barack Obama. So you have to ask yourself, when you're accepting this narrative that somehow Kamala Harris has been a failure as vice president, and how nobody at the top levels in the White House are providing leadership for the Democrats, you have to ask yourself, are you just adopting a narrative that's being created by Fox News to paint really a very impressive individual as somehow the other, who we should be afraid of? I mean, are we as progressives simply blindly accepting the attacks of the right because it's easier to do so than to stand up to them? I, for one, don't want to be in that position. And that's why I will stand up and say that I think Kamala Harris is doing a great job in many respects. I mean, it's worth noting I didn't support her in the primaries, or Joe Biden for that matter. But since they've been in office, I think under very difficult circumstances, they provided some admirable leadership. And if they were given just a couple more votes in the Senate, we'd actually be in a position to get some real progress made. So that's the solution. Attacking Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is not going to accomplish anything. Well, if you want to hear more about how the mainstream media is really hurting us in our quest to really save democracy, why don't you check out this video over here where I talk about how the mainstream media is really hiding the truth about President Joe Biden. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.